What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So Islam Makhachev is getting a little bit impatient with the UFC. He came out and said, look, Dana White, please announce my next opponent. It's been February since I fought. I need to defend my belt. He obviously has his sights set on that Abu Dhabi card in October. Now, the problem is Volkanovski said after defeating Yair Rodriguez that he has to have a surgery on his arm, so he's likely out. Charles Oliveira said he's not going to be ready, so the perennial company man, Iron Mike Chandler, has apparently stepped up to the plate and said, let's get it on. What do you think about Michael Chandler potentially stepping in there and fighting Islam?
Well, I love it because Michael Chandler deserves good things to happen to him. And I know he doesn't have a great record ever since he's gotten into the UFC. It's 2-3, and he's only fighting really tough guys. And half of those fights, it looks like he is going to get his hand raised, but he's only in there to entertain the crowd. He's only there to put on the most exciting fights. And, sometimes he jumps right in the way of a punch and gets knocked out, or sometimes he gets choked out. But every time Michael Chandler's in there, it's a meaningful fight. It's against one of the biggest names in the sport, not just at lightweight, but across all divisions. And Michael Chandler probably thought for a moment that Conor McGregor fight was going to get pulled from him, and then he was going to be left without an opponent and not going to find anybody with a name close to Conor McGregor's. And he's also not going to find himself in a title fight because he hasn't done enough winning lately. But the UFC loves when people work hard for him, when they're company men. And Michael Chandler's done a lot for the UFC in a little bit of time. And, it doesn't always have to be an 8-fight, 9-fight, 10-fight win streak to get you a UFC title. If you've done enough and you just happen to be the only guy in the room willing to raise your hand and go in there and fight somebody like Islam Makhachev, you can actually go get the job.
Yeah, and 155 is one of the most exciting divisions in the sport. It's been the most exciting historically, if you look at the UFC's entire history. And to hold up the belt there would be a shame, especially since Makhachev last defended against a 145er. Now, I know it was the 145 or 155 belt on the line, rather, but Volkanovski is a 145er. So there needs to be a true lightweight in there with the champion, and we need to keep this division sort of cruising down the track, so to speak. So if Charles Oliveira is saying, hey, I'm out, if Volkanovski's saying, hey, I have to get surgery, but I'm down to do it at sometime early next year, and nobody else is really raising their hand saying, I want to fight the champion. I'm willing to do it on short notice. I'm willing to go to Abu Dhabi and be the blue corner and do everything that's required of me to get this fight, which there's nobody in the UFC that says yes as quickly and as often as Michael Chandler. So listen, I want to see Islam fight as much as anybody. And if it's got to be against Michael Chandler, it wasn't my first choice, but I'm down to see the fight.
Oh, me too. And I think Islam and the rest of Team Khabib very much like to go off the merit system. They want somebody who is the most difficult opponent. They want the hardest fights constantly, which goes against so many other people's logic. If you listen to the great Chael Sonnen, he says, once you get to the UFC, you want to fight the easiest people for the most amount of money and in front of the most eyes you can possibly do it every single time. And if that winds up becoming really difficult fights, but at least it's like the easiest that you can possibly obtain at the moment, then so be it. But Islam and the rest of the guys with Team Khabib are kind of opposite of that. They don't want to fight you unless you're on an 8-fight, 9-fight, 10-fight win streak. They don't want to fight you if you've been coming off losses or if you're just a big name like Conor McGregor. They want you to work for your place in the rankings. And I think that's pretty cool. And while Michael Chandler's record doesn't exactly reflect the type of opposition that Islam wants to fight right now, I believe Islam will take the bait and will take the fight with Michael Chandler, even though it won't quite raise his reputation. It won't quite raise his GOAT status. It won't raise his pound-for-pound rankings, beating somebody who's 2-3 in the UFC. I think the more Islam's able to fight, the more he's able to get in there and compete, the better for him. And I don't think he needs to just sit around for another few months. And I think if the only person who's willing to fight him is Michael Chandler, then so be it. Give the crowd exactly what they want, which is an entertaining fight. Likely Islam will get his hand raised. Michael Chandler will gain even more fans. And then we'll have some more conflict resolution and plans for 2024.
Yeah, 100%. And when they circled the calendar for this card in Abu Dhabi in October, the matchmakers are still doing their thing, but tentatively you put Islam Makhachev in the main event spot for any matchup in Abu Dhabi since Khabib's retirement.
100%.
So, they definitely had his name on the tip of their tongues to headline that card, and that's probably why they set that card up for that time. So look for them to get Makhachev in there against whoever's willing to fight him. And if it's Chandler, then great, let's see it.
Yeah, he deserves it.
For sure.